The cereal box crinkled in my hand as I poured another bowl. Cheerios. Again. It was always Cheerios. Alex, my 9-year-old, loved them. Sarah used to make these elaborate breakfasts on weekends, pancakes shaped like animals, French toast with fruit faces. But mornings had become streamlined, efficient, like everything else lately. I glanced at Sarah across the kitchen island. She was scrolling through her phone, a small, almost imperceptible frown creasing her forehead. Not at me, though. Never at me anymore. It was like I'd become wallpaper, a familiar, slightly irritating fixture. Big day at work? I asked, trying to sound casual. She didn't look up. Mm-hmm. Meeting with the regional director? Oh, right, I said. The regional director. His name was David, I knew. I knew too much about David lately. The late nights, the work trips, the way her phone vibrated with texts she'd quickly hide. I'd pushed it all down, rationalized. She's stressed, she's ambitious, she's tired. But the excuses were wearing thin, like the paint on our kitchen table, chipped and peeling, revealing the raw wood underneath. I slid the bowl of Cheerios in front of Alex, who was drawing superheroes on a napkin. He looked up, his eyes bright and innocent. Dad, can you help me with this cape? Sure, buddy, I said, forcing a smile. I grabbed a crayon, tracing the outline of a flowing red cape. A cape, something strong, something that protected, something I felt increasingly incapable of providing. Sarah finally looked up, her eyes distant. I need to go, she said, grabbing her purse. No goodbye, no love you, not even a glance at Alex, just gone. Have a good day, I mumbled, the words feeling hollow even to my own ears. She paused at the doorway, then turned back, her voice flat, devoid of any emotion. I've been thinking, she said, about us. My stomach clenched. This was it. The conversation I'd been dreading, the one I desperately hoped wouldn't come. Okay, I said, my voice barely a whisper. She took a deep breath, but it didn't sound like a sigh. It sounded like a decision. I'm leaving, she said. I'm taking Pepper. Pepper, our golden retriever, the dog, not our son, not Alex, the dog. The world tilted on its axis. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, the ground crumbling beneath my feet. What? I managed to croak out. She didn't flinch. You take the kid, she said, her voice cold and final. I'm done. The words hung in the air, sharp and brutal. You take the kid. Like Alex was a chore, a burden, something to be pawned off. Not the boy I'd stayed up all night with when he had the flu, not the boy I taught to ride his bike, not the boy whose laughter used to fill our house with joy. I stared at her, speechless, the cereal spoon clutched so tightly in my hand that my knuckles ached. My wife of 10 years, the woman I'd promised forever to, the woman who was now walking out the door, leaving me with a sentence that shattered everything. The front door clicked shut, the sound echoing in the sudden, heavy silence of the house. I stood frozen, the spoon still in my hand, the Cheerios getting soggy. It was like a movie, but a really bad one where the credits rolled before the story even began. Alex looked up at me, his wide, innocent eyes searching mine. Where's Mom going? He asked, his voice small. I forced a smile, the muscles in my face protesting. She had to go, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She'll be back later. A lie, I knew it. He probably knew it, but it was the best I could manage. How do you explain to your 9-year-old that his mother just walked out, that she chose the dog over him? The rest of the morning was a blur. Getting Alex ready for school, packing his lunch, trying to act normal while my world was crumbling around me. I felt like I was moving through thick mud, every action requiring an immense effort. Dropping him off at school was the hardest part. He didn't look back like he usually did, just walked straight in, his backpack seeming too heavy for his small frame. I watched him go, a knot of guilt and fear tightening in my chest. Was I doing this right? Could I even do this at all? The house was empty, not just physically, but emotionally. The silence was deafening, broken only by the ticking of the kitchen clock. I wandered through the rooms, touching things. Sarah's favorite mug on the counter, her scarf draped over the chair, a half-finished book on her nightstand. It was like she was a ghost, her presence lingering everywhere, a constant reminder of what I'd lost, what we'd lost. My phone rang. It was my mom, her voice filled with concern. "Mark, what's going on?" Sarah called. I told her, the words coming out in a rush, a jumbled mess of disbelief and pain. She listened, her voice a steady anchor in the storm. "I'm coming over," she said. "You don't have to do this alone." And that was helpful. A little, my mom, always there, always ready to fix things. But she couldn't fix this. No one could. The next few days were a blur of logistics and raw emotions. Figuring out Alex's schedule, making dinners, trying to keep the house from falling apart. And the nights were the worst. The empty bed, the silence, the constant replay of Sarah's words in my head. "You take the kid, I'm done." I started having nightmares, waking up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding. The image of Sarah walking away burned into my mind. I was exhausted, emotionally and physically drained. But I had Alex, his small hand in mine, his trusting eyes looking up at me. That was the only thing that kept me going. He needed me, and I needed him, more than anything. The phone call with Mom was the push I needed, I guess. I couldn't keep drifting in this fog of shock and confusion. I had to figure out what to do for Alex. So I made the call. To a lawyer, a family lawyer. The words felt strange coming out of my mouth. Family lawyer. Like I was in a movie, a different kind of movie now, a legal drama. His name was Mr. Evans. He sounded calm, professional, not like the chaos swirling inside me. He asked a lot of questions. About Sarah, about Alex, about our situation. I tried to answer, my voice shaking a little, the words catching in my throat. "Custody," he said. "That's the primary concern, Mr. Harper. We need to establish a legal framework for Alex's care. Custody." The word hit me like a punch. It wasn't just about my feelings anymore. It was about Alex's future, about where he would live, who would make decisions for him, who would parent him. Mr. Evans explained the process, the paperwork, the court dates, the arguments, the idea of arguing about my son, about his life, in a courtroom filled with strangers. It made my stomach churn. I tried to talk to Sarah. A text, a simple, "We need to talk about Alex." No response. A call, straight to voicemail. "Sarah, please, he's asking for you. We need to figure this out." Nothing. It was like she'd vanished, erased herself from our lives, except for that one brutal sentence. "You take the kid." The silence was a weapon. It made me feel like I was talking to myself, like my words didn't matter, like Alex didn't matter. And then there were the things I started to notice, the credit card bills, charges for fancy dinners, for hotels, not our usual places, not places I'd been. A friend, David, mentioned seeing Sarah at a restaurant with a man who wasn't me. He didn't say anything else, just gave me a look that said, "I'm sorry, I didn't want to be the one to tell you." The pieces started to fit together. The late nights, the work trips, the phone she hid. It wasn't just stress. It wasn't just ambition. It was something else, something worse. The anger started to simmer. Underneath the hurt, underneath the fear, there was this burning rage. Not at Sarah, not really, at the situation, at the fact that this was happening to us, to Alex. I wanted to scream, to confront her, to demand answers. But Mr. Evans advised against it. "Focus on Alex, Mr. Harper," he said. "That's what matters. That's what the court will see." So I tried. I swallowed my anger, my hurt, my sense of betrayal. I focused on Alex, on his schedule, his homework, his smile. But the questions lingered. The questions I didn't know how to answer. The questions that kept me up at night. It wasn't just my life that had been turned upside down. It was Alex's too. And watching him navigate this mess was the hardest part. He didn't say much at first. Kids are like that, I guess. They absorb, they observe, they try to make sense of things in their own way. He'd ask simple questions. "Where's Mom? When's she coming back?" Questions that I struggled to answer honestly. "She's away for a while, buddy," I'd say, trying to sound reassuring. "She'll call soon." But she didn't. Not really. A quick text maybe asking about school, but no real conversation. No, "I miss you." No, "I love you." It was like he was a distant relative she was obligated to check in on, not her son. I'd watch him sometimes when he thought I wasn't looking. He'd sit by the window staring out at the empty driveway, or he'd clutch his favorite superhero action figure, the one Sarah had given him for his birthday, a little tighter than usual. He started having trouble sleeping, waking up in the middle of the night, calling out for me. Dad, I had a bad dream. And I'd go to him, hold him close, tell him stories until he drifted back to sleep. I felt so helpless. I could protect him from monsters under the bed, but how could I protect him from this? From the pain of his mother leaving? He stopped drawing for a while. That was a big red flag. Alex loved to draw. He'd fill pages with superheroes, with fantastical creatures, with pictures of our family. It was his way of processing the world, of expressing himself. But the crayons stayed in the box, untouched. The drawing pad lay open on his desk, blank. It was like his imagination had gone quiet, silenced by the uncertainty and sadness. One night, we were watching TV, a cartoon he usually loved. He was quiet, unusually quiet. I glanced at him and his eyes were glistening. "What's wrong, buddy?" I asked gently. He shrugged, his lower lip trembling. I miss her," he whispered. My heart ached, not just for me, but for him. He was so young, so innocent. He didn't deserve this. "I know you do, Alex," I said, pulling him close. "I miss her too." It felt like a small admission, a crack in the dam I'd built around my own emotions. But I needed him to know he wasn't alone, that we were in this together. He snuggled into me, his small body shaking slightly. "Will she ever come back?" I didn't know the answer to that question. I wanted to say yes, to give him some hope, but I couldn't lie to him. Not again. "I don't know, Alex," I said, honestly, "but I promise you, I'll always be here for you. Always." He nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes, the doubt that was starting to creep into his heart, and that doubt, that fear, it was all Sarah's doing. The days leading up to the court date were a blur of anxiety and a strange kind of focus. It was like I was preparing for a test I hadn't studied for, but my whole life depended on it. Mr. Evans, my lawyer, was a steady presence. He'd call, we'd go over the paperwork, the evidence, the arguments. He was calm, reassuring. But I wasn't, I couldn't be. Every time I thought about the courtroom, about Sarah, about the fact that my son's future was going to be decided by strangers in robes, my stomach churned. It was like a bad dream, a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I tried to keep things as normal as possible for Alex. School, homework, dinner, bedtime stories. But the tension was there, hanging in the air like a storm cloud. He could feel it, I knew he could. He'd ask questions. "Are we going to see Mom soon, Dad?" "What's going to happen in court?" Questions I didn't have easy answers for. "We're going to talk to some people, buddy," I'd say, trying to keep it simple. "They're going to help us figure out the best way for everyone to be okay." Lame, I know. But what else could I say? How do you explain the complexities of a custody battle to a 9-year-old? I saw Sarah once before the court date. At Alex's school, during pickup, she was talking to another parent, laughing. It was like nothing had happened, like she hadn't ripped our lives apart. I wanted to yell, to scream, to demand an explanation, but I didn't. I couldn't, not in front of Alex. I just walked past her, my jaw clenched, my hands shaking. She didn't even acknowledge me, didn't look at me. It was like I was invisible, or worse, like I was the enemy. The night before the court date, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, my mind racing. I kept replaying the conversations with Mr. Evans, the arguments he said Sarah's lawyer would make. I kept picturing Sarah's face, her cold, detached expression. And I kept thinking about Alex, about his small hand in mine, his worried eyes, about how much he needed me, and how much I needed him. I went into his room, watched him sleep. His chest rose and fell, his breathing even and peaceful. He looked so small, so vulnerable, and I knew with a fierce certainty that I would do anything to protect him. The morning of the court date was surreal. I got Alex ready for school, made him breakfast, Cheerios again. It was like a twisted version of our old routine. I dropped him off trying to act normal, to smile, to say, "Have a good day, buddy." but my heart was pounding in my chest. My hands were sweating. "I'll see you later, Dad," he said, his voice small but steady. "Yeah, buddy," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'll see you later." But I knew deep down that today was going to change everything for all of us. The judge was talking about parental fitness, about what was best for Alex. It felt so clinical, so detached, like we were exhibits in a museum, not a family in crisis. My lawyer, Mr. Evans, was doing his job. He was presenting our case, talking about my stability, my commitment to Alex, my efforts to maintain a normal life for him. I tried to focus on his words, but my mind kept wandering to Sarah, to Alex, to the what ifs, and then something changed. Mr. Evans paused, his voice taking on a different tone. "Your Honor," he said, "we have recently come into possession of evidence that we believe is highly relevant to this case." A ripple of something went through the courtroom, a shift in the air. I looked at Sarah. She was still composed, her face a mask, but I saw a flicker in her eyes, a hint of unease. Mr. Evans held up a piece of paper. "This is a text message," he said, "a message sent by Miss Harper, a message that we believe speaks directly to her feelings about her son." My heart started to pound again. What was this? What message? I didn't know anything about this. He read the message aloud. His voice was calm, professional, but the words were anything but. I couldn't breathe. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. The words, they were about Alex. They were hurtful. They were things a mother shouldn't say about her child. I looked at Sarah again. Her composure was cracking now. Her face was pale, her lips trembling. She looked caught. The judge looked serious, intent. She asked Mr. Evans to provide a copy of the message to verify its authenticity. The other lawyer, Sarah's lawyer, objected. "Your Honor, this message is out of context. It's not a fair representation of my client's feelings." But Mr. Evans was ready. He had proof. He had something that changed everything. I didn't know what to feel. Relief that the truth was coming out, anger that Sarah could say such things, sadness for Alex, for what he might have heard, for what he might have suspected. The courtroom was silent now. All eyes were on Mr. Evans, on the judge, on Sarah, and on me. I just sat there, numb, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. This wasn't just about custody anymore. This was about something bigger, about honesty, about a mother's love, about a child's heart. The silence in the courtroom was thick, heavy. It felt like the air itself was holding its breath. Everyone was looking at Mr. Evans, at the judge, at Sarah, but my eyes were on Alex. He was standing beside Mr. Evans, his small hand resting on the lawyer's leg. He looked small, but also brave. He was holding a piece of paper, a crumpled drawing, clutched in both hands. The judge looked at him, her expression softening slightly. "And who is this young man?" she asked, her voice gentle. "This is Alex Harper, Your Honor," Mr. Evans said. "Daniel and Sarah Harper's son." The judge nodded. "Alex," she said, "do you have something you'd like to share with us?" Alex looked up at Mr. Evans, then at me. I gave him a small nod, a silent encouragement. He took a deep breath, his shoulders rising and falling. He stepped forward, his voice barely a whisper at first. I found this," he said, holding up the drawing. It was a picture of two stick figures holding hands, with a superhero symbol above them. "And what is this, Alex?" the judge asked, leaning forward. Alex's voice grew a little stronger. It's a picture," he said, "of me and my dad." He unfolded the drawing, revealing something written on the back. He looked at me again, his eyes searching mine. I nodded again. "It's okay, buddy. You can do this." He started to read. His voice was small but clear. "It's a message," he said, "from my mom." He read the words from the text message, the words that I still couldn't believe she'd written, about him, about how she felt. His voice didn't waver. He read them slowly, carefully, making sure everyone in the room heard every single word. The words hung in the air, heavy and raw. They were honest, too honest. They were a glimpse into a side of Sarah that that I hadn't wanted to believe existed. When he finished, the silence returned. But it was a different silence now, a silence of shock, of understanding, of a child's truth laid bare. I looked at Sarah. Her face was, I don't know how to describe it, shame, regret, a mixture of both. She was looking at Alex, her eyes filled with something, but it wasn't love, not anymore. The judge looked moved. She looked at Alex, at me, at Sarah. She looked at the message. She looked at the boy who had just spoken his truth, his heart laid out for everyone to see. And in that moment I knew something had shifted, something had changed, not just in the courtroom, but in everything. The silence that followed Alex's words was different. It wasn't just quiet. It was thick, heavy with the weight of what he'd said. It pressed down on the room, a silence that spoke volumes. I looked around. The judge was still. Her expression was hard to read, but I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Understanding, disappointment, both. The lawyers were stunned. Sarah's lawyer, who had been so confident before, was now pale, his mouth slightly open. He looked like he'd been punched in the gut. Sarah was looking at Alex. Her face was a mix of emotions I couldn't quite decipher. Shame, maybe. Regret. But also something else. Something that looked almost like fear. Alex was still standing there holding the drawing. He looked small, but he also looked relieved. Like he'd finally said something he'd been holding inside for a long time. I wanted to go to him, to hug him, to tell him how brave he was. But I couldn't move. I was frozen, caught in the gravity of the moment. The silence stretched on, each second feeling like an eternity. Finally, the judge spoke. Her voice was low, serious. "Thank you, Alex," she said. "That was very helpful." She turned to the lawyers. "I think," she said, "we need to take a short recess. I need some time to consider the information that has been presented." A recess. It was like a pause button had been pressed on the whole situation. Everyone started to move, to stand up, to whisper. But the weight of Alex's words still hung in the air. Outside the courtroom it was strange. People were talking, but their voices seemed muted, subdued. Sarah walked past me, her head down, without a word. I wanted to say something, but what could I say? "I told you so?" How could you? None of it seemed enough. Mr. Evans put a hand on my shoulder. "That was powerful, Daniel," he said. "Your son is a very brave young man." I nodded, but I couldn't speak. I was still processing everything. The message, Alex's courage, Sarah's reaction, it was all too much. We waited, the minutes ticking by slowly. Each one felt like an hour. I kept thinking about Alex, about what he'd gone through, about what he'd said. He hadn't just spoken the words, he'd spoken his truth, and that truth, it had changed everything. The recess felt like a lifetime. I sat there trying to process everything that had happened. Alex's courage, the judge's reaction, Sarah's, everything. It was all a whirlwind. Finally, we were called back into the courtroom. The judge looked tired, but her voice was firm. She spoke about the law, about what was in the best interest of the child. She talked about parental responsibility, about emotional well-being, about love, and then she made her decision. I won't go into all the legal details, but the outcome was, better than I could have hoped for. It wasn't about winning or losing. It was about Alex. And Alex was going to be okay. Afterward, outside the courtroom, it was strange, a mix of relief and exhaustion. Mr. Evans shook my hand, his smile genuine. "You did it, Daniel," he said. "You and Alex." I nodded, but I didn't feel like I'd done anything. Alex was the brave one. He was the one who had spoken his truth. Sarah walked past me again. This time she stopped. She looked at me, her eyes, I still couldn't read them, but there was something there, something broken. She started, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry. I didn't say anything. What could I say? Sorry didn't fix things. Sorry didn't erase the words she'd written, the hurt she'd caused. I just looked at her, and then I walked away." The drive home was quiet, peaceful in a way. I looked in the rearview mirror at Alex sitting in the back seat, drawing. He was drawing superheroes again. "How are you feeling, buddy?" I asked. He looked up, his eyes clear. "Good, Dad," he said. "I'm glad it's over." Me too, I thought. Me too. The house felt different now, still empty, but not as heavy. The silence wasn't as deafening. It was a silence of a new beginning. We started to build a new routine, just me and Alex. Pancakes on weekends, not just on the days that end in Y. Movie nights, trips to the park. I even tried to learn how to braid his hair. It was a disaster, but he laughed. It wasn't easy. There were still hard days. There were still nights when I woke up with a start, the memory of Sarah's words echoing in my head. But we were healing, slowly, surely. We were finding our way back to something. Not the way things were before, but something new. Something stronger. I learned a lot. About myself, about Alex, about what really mattered, about the power of a child's love, and the strength of a father's determination. And I knew, looking at Alex, at his bright, hopeful eyes, that even though she took the dog, I got the kid. And that was all that mattered.